Okay, Andrea, you have access to an enabled microphone, and in about a minute, I'll ask you to introduce this afternoon's presenter. Thank you. Okay, Andrea, it's 2:30. I think I'll ask you to introduce Arlene Cronin, if you would do that for us, please. Andrea Dickinson, Executive Director of the Tri-County Literacy Network, is this afternoon's moderator. Go ahead, Andrea. And you just can click the microphone icon to.
Thank you, Sarah. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to our webinar today. It's good to see we have a good response again. Just as a little background, we've been providing these online community practice series for the last 3 years. It's basically at your desk training or learning, so it's a great opportunity to learn in that type of format. We've been very fortunate to have the collaboration of Contact North and the Learning Networks of Ontario for the past couple of years, and then this year we've added Community Literacy of Ontario and ACE Distance Delivery. So it's a great opportunity for us to work together to help the LBS field. This year we have 5 webinars as part of the series. And e-channel providers are involved in giving the first 4 webinars, and then the last one, there will be some practitioners involved in that one. And the focus for this series is on blended learning. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Arlene Cronin. Arlene has worked in education throughout her career, first as a reading and English teacher in public schools, and later as an English professor and administrator at St. Lawrence College, where she held a number of management positions, including Dean of Academic Policy and Development. Arlene has a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Arts degree from the State University of New York at Plattsburgh, and has extensive experience in curriculum and program development. Arlene now works as an educational consultant for the College Sector Committee for Adult Upgrading as the project lead for ACE Distance Delivery, which provides academic upgrading courses online. Arlene has had a long-term commitment to adult upgrading and literacy. She has served on boards at both the community and provincial level and is currently a member of the Board of Directors of Kingston Literacy. Arlene is also an active member on the Ontario Community, the Online Community of Practice Committee, and so we appreciate all her involvement on that. And I'll turn things over to Arlene.
Thanks very much, Andrea. Over to you, Arlene.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here with you today to talk about what Ministry of Skills, Advanced Education and Skills Development calls blended learning, but we call shared learning. And this is about creating win-win-wins, really, for students, for you, and for partner agencies. You know that if you have been around for a while, you'll remember back at the start of CAMS, which is what, 4 or 5 years ago now, there wasn't sharing of learners, and there was a lot of fear in the community of practice that if we were going to share students, it would be about sending them to that big black hole in the sky, that it's going to be about body snatching. So the whole point of this presentation today is to help you to have a much better understanding at the end of an hour of just exactly how we can all succeed by sharing students, and how the students can benefit most of all from this whole process. So, to begin, first of all, I should tell you, there is no single reliable definition of the term blended learning. Um, and, and if you want to amuse yourself, just go up and Google it some afternoon and sort of take a look at the first half dozen entries that come up. That there seem to be some pretty broad definitions. In fact, there's no universal agreement in terms of what constitutes blended learning. Pedagogically, in academic circles, those who belong to school boards, those who work in colleges, those who are in academic departments in universities, there's an understanding that blended learning combines a few elements that sort of are consistent regardless of how they're applied. And that combines online digital media along with traditional classroom-based methods, and that blended learning requires the presence of both a teacher and a student. And the student has to have some control over either the time, the place, the goal path, or the pace of the learning. But other than that, there's nothing else that sort of hangs together in terms of what does it mean by blended learning. In fact, in the Cathexis report, the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development has sort of defined blended learning as learners who access both in-person and online learning. And so that's what they call blended learners. And so that's the term that they use. For the purposes of today, I'm going to use the term shared learning because I think it avoids confusion. Because in fact, many people who use the more traditional blended learning approach, it all happens within one organization. So this shared learners sort of tells us right off the top, in fact, that this is going to be between two agencies. Now, all that's nice, but quite frankly, as a service provider, the big question always is, what's in this for me, or what's in this for my learners? And so that's going to be sort of the overarching framework of this presentation. And it's interesting, when I looked at, sort of started listing what the benefits were, they're almost equally divided. That in fact, shared learning can provide a richer learning experience for your student. It will give you access to new or additional curriculum, to new and additional technology, or to new and different delivery formats that your learner has not maybe had an opportunity to experience before. So that makes for a much richer learning environment. It also gives a language of choice to your student. And normally we're talking about, English and French, but in fact, we also are able to provide programming in ASL for deaf learners. So that's a whole other layer of complexity. For you, this is an opportunity to reach out and connect with some of your rural and remote learners. I mean, as many of you know, the cost of trying to provide delivery in small locations where you may not have an actual physical presence, or where you don't have much equipment, or in fact you may only have one or two learners, makes that almost a self-defeating experience. However, with shared learners, if you use the resources of several organizations, it does allow you to reach out and to connect with remote learners. And we have seen that a lot in the e-channel programs in terms of where our learners come from. We're reaching out into very remote communities where we're giving access to students who just normally would not be able to connect with literacy learning. We also are able to connect you with shift workers or seasonal workers or those who are casually employed who just can't always connect to a classroom-based program. You know that there are many, many, many workers now, particularly in the kind of economy that we exist in today, where many, many people are contract workers or they're working casual. And so if Walmart needs them in the morning today, but in the afternoon or the evening 2 days from now, they can't commit to being in a classroom-based program between 9 and 12 or 9 and 3. And so, in fact, shared learning may actually help them to maintain their learning when they're working or when they can't be in a full-time program. It also gives you access to, and the student, access to remedial or refresher materials. And that is a, that's a big expense saving because every time you have to invest in more development of curriculum materials, that's a fair investment of resources. And so to have sort of some of the best thinking from a lot of different places is a wonderful benefit to you and to your learners. The other thing is students can have access to enrichment activities. And lastly, it also gives access to culturally appropriate programming. Now, these are all sort of nebulous, and that's fine because I'm trying to sort of give you the overall scan of the landscape. But we're going to talk about what does that mean in more depth. So, I'm from eChannel. How does eChannel fit into shared learning? Okay, I mean, because in fact you can do shared learning between two bricks and mortar program. That's not often the way it works. However, because of the way the LSPs and the ministry has encouraged people to identify sort of areas of expertise and who provides what levels of service, they're trying to avoid duplication. So in fact, each channel tends to be a resource that gives you access to many of all of those tools actually without having to get engaged with you sort of eating somebody else's lunch in your own community and making enemies, not friends. eChannel is the distance learning service within the LBS program. Okay, and the 5 eChannel providers provide services to all sectors and to all levels of learners. So between one of the 5 of us, you can go everywhere from absolutely the very lowest level of level 1 learners down, right up to and including students who are qualifying for college programming and apprenticeship programming. The eChannel also is able to provide you between its various providers with both synchronous and asynchronous delivery of programming. And that may be a new phrase for you. Synchronous just means that the courses take place at a set time and a set location. And so there are many courses where they say, okay, this course is offered twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. on Saba. Okay, so that's a synchronous example of programming. And then there's asynchronous delivery, which is anytime, anywhere. My program, for example, doesn't do any synchronous delivery. Ours is totally asynchronous. All of our programming is up online, and so students can access their courses whenever they want, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And actually, a real example, we've been in business now for 10 years, and in the last 10 years, we have seen, because we can track using our analytics, when students log on. And in fact, we know that the busiest time for adult learners is between 9 o'clock and 1 a.m. in the morning for our learners. And we have also seen that because we know the demographics show that 75% of our learners are female, many times what we recognize is that these are women who are working either full-time or part-time, who often have kids, and so they're taking care of their kids, making sure everybody's got clean clothes and something to eat, and then the kids get their homework done and are going to bed. And then once the kids are in bed, it's their time then to focus on themselves. And this has been consistent year in and year out, year in and year out. 9 o'clock, they're logging on to work on their chemistry course or work on their physics course, and so it's it's a format that works very well for those high-level learners. That probably would not work very well for the lowest levels, but for ours it does. We are also able with eChannel to offer a full range of programming. We can offer remedial, so if you have students who come to you and who are not appropriate for the level of learning that you deliver, you can in fact refer them to another program for remediation. Or if you have in fact learners who need credentialing, you can do that as well. And finally, there is enrichment program, just because people are interested and want to learn things. The 5 agencies represent all of the sectors and all of the streams, and so that's we cover the waterfront. I should tell you that, for example, I'm going to give you an example of remedial. ACE Distance, because our course, all of our coursework is at the grade 11 and 12 level, we often come to us or have students come to us and say, I'd like to take physics, and then when we do some assessment, we find out that they're not functioning anywhere close to the level required for that course. And so we're able to then refer them as a shared learner, because they may very well have tested out appropriately, say in communications or in other areas, but they need remediation in math, or and so in fact what we often do is we tend to partner with the Learning Hub as the other Anglophone program, and so there are learner, we refer them to the Learning Hub, they do the remedial work with them, and then they're sent back to us, and we have found that that works very, very nicely. Nobody worries about, oh, are they taking my student, because we're both going to win from this whole process. So who is eChannel? Well, you're going to see there are 6 groups here, but in fact there are 5 deliverers. The Anglophone stream, the Learning Hub is the lead for the Anglophone stream, and I thought I would put this up, this channel, chart up, because you often hear each channel agency referred to by their names of their program, but in fact sometimes you hear them referred to by the agency who is responsible for delivery. And so the Centers for Employment and Learning for the Avon-Maitland District School Board, in fact, is the agency that delivers programming through the Learning Hub. ACE Distance, College Sector for Committee for Adult Upgrading, and I'll skip down to Access Carrière Études is also through the college sector for upgrading, because there are 2 French language colleges in the system, Collège Boréal and La Cité Collégiale. We do both English and French programming for ACE Distance, because our learners are in fact preparing to go into post-secondary or apprenticeship programming. The Francophone lead, though, is COFA through Formation à Distance, and they're undergoing some change right now because they're executive director. So when we talk about contacts, you'll be wanting to pay attention in the next little while as there'll be a new executive director. Philippe Landry is moving on very shortly. Um, Good Learning Anywhere is the Aboriginal group through the Sue Hudson Literacy Council. And Deaf Learn Now is the deaf program, the deaf online program, which is operated through George Brown College. George Brown College has both a classroom-based deaf program as well as a deaf-blind program and the Deaf Learn Now program online. Actually, should we take a little break, and are there any questions that people have at this point? I'm looking at questions.
If you do have a question, please do feel free to click the raised hand icon, and that'll flag our attention. Thank you.
Yeah, I see Pauline had a question about the accessing time between 9 a.m. to, no, Pauline, the analytics show that 9 p.m. is the primary time for people to log on to ACE Distance to 1 a.m. in the morning after midnight. So that, yeah, that they, you know, what we think our learners do and what they do sometimes is a revelation to us. Okay, it doesn't look like I have any questions at this point. So let's talk about using eChannel to serve shared learners. And some of these you'll have seen referenced before. So to reach rural and remote learners, all 5 of the eChannel providers do that because they either use a platform like SABA to provide synchronous classes, and or because they use a computer-based program like we do with ACE Distance. We use Moodle to do our courses, or because people are using programs like Play-Doh to teach specific skills. All of those can be used to reach rural and remote learners. So if that's who you're trying to connect to learning, to literacy learning, take your pick. If you want to share, any of those agencies should be able to help you. Students whose skills are rusty, and rusty is a deliberate use in this instance, because one of the things when we started ACE Distance, we discovered that there were students who, when they did the essential skills for education and employment assessment, which we use to determine eligibility for our program, we had students who were testing out slightly below the cutoff. And it turned out that these students had done math before, but hadn't done it in a long time. I mean, probably like some of us, right? That, yeah, I took calculus, but God help me now. And so I think that's true of many math users. You know, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so, in fact, we developed a numeracy support course that we provide to learners who test out when they do the essential skills course. If they test out between 225 and 249 on the essential skills numeracy component, we in fact enroll them in the numeracy support course. One of the things we've been tracking that also is we know that that's a 40-hour course, and after a student completes the course, on average they're gaining about 55 points on their essential skills assessment in math skills. So it's just they needed somebody to bang the rust off their old math skills. It's not a course that's intended to teach people the math in the first place, but just to refresh it for them. The other thing that we did with this course was that we found that many students didn't have a methodology for problem solving, and so when it came to word problems, they were totally hosed because they had no idea how to tease information out of a word problem to figure out what they needed to do. And so, in fact, we put the first module in, which is a 3-step critical thinking and skill problem-solving methodology that students are asked to use throughout the course. Okay. The assessment tool, Sam, you said what assessment tool that was used? We use, it's called EASEE, E-S-E-E, Essential Skills for Education and Employment. And it's available, like when a student comes to us and signs up, that's one of the first things that we do. We ask them to do that. But in fact, many other agencies have been using it throughout the province for the last couple years because we've made that available to other agencies at no cost. Free is good. The other thing is we've done the analytical studies, like from our program. Like after we had 2,000 students go through and do the EASEE assessment, we went back and did the correlation studies to determine if you scored X on EASEE in math, what was your likelihood of being able to pass core math, business math, technology math, apprenticeship math. And so we were able to set entry standards for each one of our courses based upon the actual performance of learners based upon a couple years worth of data. And so that has made a huge difference because now we're setting students up for failure. We're not setting them up for or setting them up for success, not for failure. That, you know, if somebody tests out and they're below the cutoff, it's much kinder to be able to say, we're not saying no to you. We just believe that you need this work before, and so we can connect you with one of our partner agencies for some remediation before you come back to us. So we're not kicking you, we're not kicking you to the curb and saying no, you can't do what you want to do. In fact, what we're just saying is you need some extra work to get there, get the foundations in place. For students who need help with reading, writing, and numeracy, the Learning Hub and Good Learning Anywhere are the Learning Hub has the full range of math programming and most of communications. Good Learning Anywhere has a fair bit of writing programming, and so this is all you may be interested in partnering with them for some work with your learners. If a student needs to gain prerequisites for colleges, because as you know, if a student wants to go to college, if you want to be in paramedic, there are specific courses that students have to have the prerequisites for. ACE Distance offers those prerequisites. That's in fact the programming that ACE Distance delivers. And so if a student needs an equivalent for grade 11 C-level math, then they can do that through ACE Distance, and then that's recognized for admission purposes for apprenticeship or post-secondary programming. DeafLearn Now has programming for deaf learners, and I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to give you some links further on in this presentation, but I would highly, if you've never been up to DeafLearn Now's website, I would highly suggest that you go up and take a look. You know that we've all been to meetings where we've worked with the interpreters and the sign language translators, but it's interesting to see how that works in an online environment. And so I would highly suggest that you go up to DeafLearn Now and click on some of their they have some examples and some samples of the work that they do so that you can see what that involves and whether that may be beneficial for some of your learners. For francophones below ACE level, Formation a Day FAD is the contact, and the ACE level, it's Boreal Access Carrière Etude. You can tell my French is not good. And then a good example of cultural enrichment is through the Good Learning Anywhere Agency. They have a program called Sharing Circles where they bring in high-profile Aboriginal speakers to talk about the work they do, the experiences they've had, and the things they've done. And so that if you're talking about, giving Aboriginal learners a connection to positive role model, some of the folks that they've had here, had with their sharing circles, are wonderful examples. So you may want to, even if you have Aboriginal learners that they're happy with your programming, but in fact this may be a way to give them a slightly richer learning environment. There's a question from Judy. Oh, I didn't see that one. Is there financial support for internet similar to the training support we provide at a bricks and mortar center? No, there isn't, unfortunately. Basically there have been no supports for learners in terms of online learners for either childcare or travel, or any other support. We have talked about that, and matter of fact, in this last round of conversation, particularly the mental health pieces. There's been some discussion about the need for some supports and what should that look like. And I think it's going to be an increasingly important conversation, because I think all programs have some kind of support needs to help our learners overcome the barriers they have. I mean, I sometimes wondered why there wasn't money that you could buy an extra 50 computers or laptops or tablets that you could then loan out to learners who, are not able to afford their own computer. Okay. So now I'm going to connect the dots for you. So I've talked about the big overarching. I've talked about sort of in specifics when we talked about those language of choice and rural learners and enrichment programs. But in fact, if you want to go up and look up close and personal, here are some specific examples of how this all works. So if you want a service in the language of choice, if you want it in ASL, you can go up to Deaf Learn Now, Better Emails, Part 1, Part 2, and that's the URL. I would encourage you to go and take a look at that. This is the French ACE in French, and so through Collège Boréal, they offer the full range of ACE programming in French. When we developed the English courses, basically we developed them in English. We gave all the material to the Francophones. Now, that's not that big a deal in many respects, because they still have to find online resources that in French that support the work they're doing, and so there's a fair bit of development and research that has to go into making that flip. It's not just a straight translate the words and there you go. When you're looking to provide service to rural and remote learners, all of the ACE distance courses, including biology and chemistry, which are our math, biology, and chemistry are our biggest uptake programs. There's huge interest in health and life science programming. I think every young man in the province wants to be a paramedic until he discovers that they have to work shifts and weekends, and there's blood involved. That sometimes it's a hugely popular topic. Just like sort of 5 or 6 years ago, everybody wanted to be a police officer. I think they thought they were going to do Miami Vice or something. the Learning Hub, an asynchronous program they have, creative writing, telling your story. And it's interesting. Even folks who do not have sophisticated levels of literacy are very interested in writing and expressing themselves. That's a real driving force among many literacy learners. And so whether it's writing poetry or writing about themselves, like a memoir, or just being able to express themselves, it's very, very empowering. Learning Hub, creative writing, telling your story may be a course that's of interest to your learners. In a synchronous format, so that means there's a teacher, a specific time, and how to write a cover letter. I mean, again, you have many, many learners who, if they want to connect to employment, and if you could combine it with another one, if you're talking about seasonal workers or casual workers who have not yet made an attachment to the labor force, a synchronous course like how to write a cover letter may serve a really good purpose in terms of helping them to get a little bit closer to being connected to the labor force. Good Learning Anywhere has a course in money management, fundamentals of budgeting. And again, that's a skill that you may, if you don't have much money, money management becomes more important than I think if you have lots of it. And I can tell you that having worked in the college system, it's amazing the number of students who end up dropping out of college because they don't have money management skills. They see their OSAP and they think they're rich, but they haven't learned about how do you manage it and parse it out throughout the academic year to be able to continue their education. If you want to look at shift workers and seasonal and casually employed, again, Computer Fundamentals is a course that we try and encourage learners to take because it's astonishing the number of learners who say, oh, well, I already know how to work a computer. I'm really good at it. What they know is how to surf the web, but in fact, they frequently know almost nothing about file management. They know nothing about sort of saving files and organization, naming files so that they can actually retrieve it later. And so that's a course that somebody who is casually employed or a shift worker may very well benefit from acquiring some of those basic skills. Good Learning Anywhere has a Ready for Work program. And again, helps people to get ready to be successful in the labor market. And there's always a demand for GED prep, and the Learning Hub offers the full range of GED preps. So if a student needs, they can take sort of just one or two, the ones that they're missing, or sometimes, in fact, there are bundles of GED prep courses through the Learning Hub that may be of value to some of your learners. In a synchronous mode, I'm very impressed by this one, the Nindaumoen, A Good Way of Thinking, Introduction to Mental Health. We know that mental health is increasingly becoming an issue for many of our learners, and so anything we can do to help people to become more familiar with their own mental health needs and how they can help themselves with mental health is a good thing, I think. And so I was really happy. This is a brand new course that Good Learning Anywhere is just going to be beginning very shortly. And then the Learning Hub does preparing for a job interview. Again, if you're shift workers or you're casually employed, the more you can do to prepare for a job interview, the better the student is likely to be able to make that attachment to the labor market. And then Deaf Learn Now, here's another one, a very, very practical skill. helping a deaf person to get their G1 driver's license. And I mean, that's if you're ever going to become, employable, for many, many people, having a driver's license is basic to being that. So, I think I talked about some of these. Yeah, remedial refresher courses. So I talked about numeracy support. DeafLearn now does a math course on time and fractions. That those of us who are a little older, who learned to tell time back before digital watches, where it just says, 3:36, we learned to tell time a different way. There's a whole need for doing this with some of the learners now, because they don't tell time unless it's digital, and they struggle with fractions as well. Here's another, in the enrichment programs, we talked about the sharing circles, but again, here are things that people are just interested in. Good Learning Anywhere is doing a course, Off the Beaten Path, geocaching with your smartphone. So this is I thought this was very clever for a couple reasons. Geocaching is an increasingly popular sport with young people, and the fact that they do it with their smartphone, I don't think there's anybody in the province who doesn't have a smartphone at this point. So it's a nice way to get people connected and interested. Can a hearing person take the DeafLearn Now course? Says Sam. I'm not sure about that, but it's worth asking. I would think a hearing person, if they understood sign language, probably could. But I think some of these DeafLearn Now courses also have a voiceover track for those who are hard of hearing rather than actual deaf. So I'm not sure about the answer to that. And how do you make the Introduction to Mental Health and G1 course fit into the OALCF? I'm not sure how they've done that, to tell you the truth, because not my program. I know all of ours has been done, but I'm sure that Good Learning Anywhere would be happy to tell you how mental health and the G1 course through DeafLearn Now fit in. Rachel Ann, would you like to say something? We'd love to hear from you.
Hi everyone, sorry for being late. So I'm Rachel Ann. As Sarah said, I am the interim project manager here at the Service de Formation à Distance pour Adultes de l'Ontario. So we are a French e-channel service provider, and we have 25 Francophone centers in Ontario that we work closely with, but we also have some learners that come from outside of centers. So we provide many different courses, and this is, I just want to say that this webinar, even if I've just been here for 10 minutes, I can say that it's very informative. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel Ann. Sarah says DeafLearn Now requires its registrants to be able to study and communicate in ASL. So, Sam, if you can do ASL, yep, you can sign up. If not, I guess not. Yeah, and Rachel Ann's comments, the creative writing course is excellent. I've heard that also. Okay, so here was, Heather had a question. Whoops. Where did, uh-oh. I just lost my chapter. Here we go.
Do you see it, Heather? Heather's question was, do you share the ESEE results correlation with the college sector committee and I guess all of the college providers?
In terms of what our requirements are? Yes, we do. We have, a matter of fact, we have a chart that we have we widely distribute this. So if you want to take core math, for example, you have to have a math score of 250. The same is also true if you want to do communications. If you want physics, however, you have to have a reading score of 275 and a math score of 325, because we found that if they're below that, they're just struggling. They can't do the maths to succeed. So yes, we do share that. Not by specific learner, just by what's required to succeed. Other questions? Okay, I think we're almost through. Oh, okay, so now that you've said, gee, maybe I could get something out of this, the question is, how does the shared learner process work, right? And so this is basically a global one, but in fact, first of all, a student enrolls with a service provider, and that's the initial service provider. That organization sets up the service profile, they conduct the assessments, they create a service plan and CAMS for that learner. So they become their student, right? Then they also begin to start receiving services from the enrolling agency. At the same time, either then or a little later in their progress, they're also referred to another LBS agency for additional services. So for example, if you have an Aboriginal student and you think you'd like them to take 1 or 2 courses through Good Learning Anywhere, then in fact you can do that, and you would send an assessment, send their assessment info and the learner plan to the receiving agency. The receiving agency creates another service plan in CAMS, okay, so that because a student can have more than one service plan, and they receive the services from both agencies. When the learner is finished with the receiving agency, that agency sends a notification, any grades or any milestones that were completed, to the original agency, and they can then put that into their CAMS file, and any credit that they get is also in their CAMS file. So both agencies receive the credit for registering the learner. If the second agency is no longer providing service, they close their service plan, but then the student continues on with the first agency until such time as it's time for them to move on. And that sounds quite complicated. It's actually not once you've done it, and what we've done is you'll see that 4 of the 5 agencies have an online referral form on their websites. So here's the Learning Hubs, Deaf Learn Now, Good Learning Anywhere, and FAD. ACE Distance has not yet put the referral form up onto our website. However, we do have a refillable form which you are going to receive as part of your package. Sarah, would you put that up?
I will. Just give me a second.
And it's also available for download. We actually did ours as a fillable form. This is just a Word document, but all you have to do is to download the file, and then when you want to click it, you just click here to enter the student's name or the client's name, and so on and so forth. One of the things that we chose this format for was that because most agencies want a copy for their files, so you complete the form, you print a file, you save it, you send a copy back as an attachment to me, and then you can print a copy for your file also, so that you can tell exactly what it is you want done. So you want them enrolled in communication support or numeracy support, or want them to learn, or do you want them to do something else? And if so, you just type in what it is you'd like from them. And if you have any of these background documents, you send it off. So it just makes it nice and smooth um, for switching between one agency and another. We're actually using that with yeah, this is the downloadable form, so you can download that if you are interested in the using a hard copy of the transfer. One of the things that we've been doing is Humber College has a number of students that they've been sending to us because they're testing out below where they're at, and so we're able to either provide them with numeracy support, or if they're below our cutoff, we in fact are able to send them on. Sorry. Okay, Sarah, I was hearing your voice. No?
No, I was muted, Arlene.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Okay. And in fact, okay, so I guess we can go down to there. So if you want to know more about eChannel, I would encourage you to listen to us, because last year we created a series of small 5 to 6 minute podcast sound bites and about our agencies. And so you can find those here on SoundCloud. You can also find it on the Contact North website that Sarah has posted all of the individual ones. What's really nice is that you don't have to listen to them all at once. You can, if you're curious about the Learning Hub, you can just click on that and you can listen to Courtney talk about the Learning Hub and what they do and how they can help you. And then if you have another time, you can go back and listen to somebody else. The eChannel introduction is basically Sarah talking about eChannel overall. And one of the things that's kind of nice about this series of podcasts is you can download them, and then you can, if you happen to be in a metro area, if you're sitting in the on the subway, or if you're sitting on 401 in traffic, you in fact can listen to them while you're driving home or driving to work. So it's another way to learn more about eChannel if you're interested. And lastly, contact information. Here's how you get hold of us. We all have websites, and you're more than welcome to contact us if you think you have clients that we could work on together. If you in fact have suggestions for us for programming, we're always looking for good ideas. And so if you think that you have an idea that you have an unmet need for some of your learners, I'm sure that any and all of the eChannel learners would be happy to hear from you. So now I'm 8 minutes early, so that was our target. We were going to try and make sure that you had some time to talk at the end. So I'm open to answer questions and to listen to what you have to say. Thank you very much for attending this afternoon.
Arlene, I see we have some interest again in dealing with the shared milestones, and I don't know if you would like to comment further on that. It's always a concern, I think, of agencies and trying to understand that there isn't necessarily the duplication they may think that infers.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I see Shirley's, no, Melody's wanting to have an actual piece of paper in the files when they're audited. There's no reason why that can't happen, to tell you the truth. I mean, every milestone that a student in ACE Distance does comes into my inbox and gets put into a folder, so that when my faculty mark, they have a hard copy of it, and I ask them to keep that. But we can also just take that milestone that the student submitted, and I can send it on to you, no problem. So that you have a copy in your file, and so if it says, okay, they're doing, they've done milestone 14, they in fact can see what milestone 14 looks like. And some of these you'll see, for example, 14 is used by several agencies because it's tied to a video. And so we use 14 for chemistry because we have a 3 or 4 minute video on chemical transformations or transactions, whereas I know Good Learning Anywhere has a level 1 milestone for milestone 14. But in fact, there's no reason why that can't happen. Okay. So Rachel Ann says, we, the eChannel SP, send the senders a hard copy of the milestone. Sometimes it's even the senders that will administer the milestone tasks with the learners. They then send us the results in hard copy via fax or email. Yeah, whatever works for agencies is good. Okay. Somebody else have a question?
This afternoon, we're really happy to have some of the eChannel providers and program managers here as well. They're monitoring all the questions, Arlene, and they're going to keep running with the ball, so to speak, as we go forward. There will be more information provided to all of you on some of the questions you're posing, such as how the providers level their courses to the OALCF when they
Yes.
choose these subjects, and more again to help you understand how to navigate these assessments for mutually shared learners. So this isn't the end. We're just getting into this subject, and we're really grateful for Arlene's contribution this afternoon. And if there are more questions for her or comments, please let us know.
Yes, because I mean, Sarah's right. We're really at the beginning of this journey. The ministry has, turned that corner, and now, now I think people are actually starting to really say, "Oh, wow!" I mean, one of the realities is we all have increased targets now. This is an opportunity to help you make sure you're hitting your targets by and providing the very best service to your customers and your learners by making sure that that we're sharing them around. It's a win for everybody. Other questions? If not, then I'll just say thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you'll come back for webinar number 3. Courtney Brown from the Learning Hub is coming up next.
And I'd like to thank you again, Arlene, for a wonderful presentation this afternoon. And I'd like to assure everyone that we're going to be sharing Arlene's presentation following this webinar. I'll be sending out messaging to all of you with the presentation and other links to the recording and to the registration for the upcoming webinar as well. So if there are any other questions or comments, I'll stand by. But thanks so much, everyone, for attending and participating today.
One last comment, Sarah. We're getting ready to be putting out these catalogs for winter offerings through Contact North and through the agencies. So please be looking at our websites to see what's going to be offered this winter that might be of interest and of value to your learners.
Okay, hearing no questions, last call, but I'm going to stop recording. And once more, thank you all. We look forward to seeing you again. If you can possibly join us next month, our November 30th webinar will be hosted or moderated. I can't get the right word, presented by Courtney Brown from the Learning Hub. And we'll continue on a winning note to make for best practice knowledge that helps all of you. Thanks again, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.